Hillary Clinton, health, and the road to the White House. On today's Newsmakers, we ask how Clinton's pneumonia diagnosis has affected her campaign. Is it a minor stumble, or is there more at stake? Also on today's program, an ill-conceived intervention based on erroneous assumptions and an incomplete understanding of the evidence. British MPs give a damning verdict on the UK's action in Libya. And in Picture This, the sweet sound of victory. Why athletes at the Rio Paralympics are listening to their medals. Hello and welcome to the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garza. Hillary Clinton has pneumonia. Is it a big deal? The health of the Democratic presidential candidate has been the subject of speculation throughout the campaign, long before cell phone footage emerged of her collapsing as she got into a car last weekend. And that speculation has largely been fueled by her Republican rival, Donald Trump, and his supporters. So, is it simply an example of a media circus in which Clinton is unfairly targeted, or are more serious issues of presidential health at stake? Our newsmaker today is Hillary Clinton, as we ask how damaging the events of recent days have been to her campaign.
This question is not just about Hillary Clinton's health, but also her veracity, transparency, after her campaign revealed late yesterday that she was diagnosed with pneumonia.
That said, candidates are allowed to get sick.
Hillary's handler, I guess, called was a diazepam pen. What would that be for?
So go online and put down Hillary Clinton illness. Take a look at the videos for yourself.
A stumble on the campaign trail has sucked Hillary Clinton back into the vortex of the 24/7 U.S. cable news theory machine.
Well, I really just don't know. I hope she gets well soon. I don't know what's going on, whatever it is.
So health is an issue now, right?
I think it's an issue.
Donald Trump does not have the temperament to
Pneumonia is a relatively common condition, and the road to the White House is long and hard. Non-stop travel, speeches, and rallies. 2 days after she was diagnosed, Hillary Clinton appeared to have collapsed trying to get into a van. After attending the 15-year anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. Now it appears to many that was what forced her illness out into the open. Her campaign says she felt overheated. The incident has reignited a debate over whether Hillary faces a trust deficit with the American public.
How are you feeling, Secretary Clinton?
Great. A few hours later, she emerged from her daughter's apartment in New York City.
It's a beautiful day in New York.
Hillary Clinton's doctor says she's recovering. And while her illness may soon subside, the scrutiny over her health and her character is far from over.
I think she has a medical problem that is being hid from the public.
Everybody gets heat stroke, but we'll never know what the true reason is.
Her campaign shouldn't suffer one bit. If you get any publicity, it's good publicity.
Hillary Clinton has already weathered several media storms on her road to the White House. She faced accusations of gross negligence over the use of her private email account for official business while she served as Secretary of State, along with accusations of having a conflict of interest involving the Clinton Foundation, an NGO she founded with her husband, former President Bill Clinton. Supporters say she's resilient and that she has been unfairly treated by the media. An analysis of media election coverage earlier this year showed that Clinton received the most negative stories overall, even more than Donald Trump. The self-described blue-collar billionaire has made a number of what some would call gaffes and others would describe as plain-spokenness.
We'll bring our jobs back.
Gaffes or not, they've put Donald Trump in the spotlight. And yet a fraud trial he faces involving Trump University has gotten far less coverage than Clinton's illness, according to a study by media watchdog Media Matters.
She also lacks the mental and physical stamina to take on ISIS.
With so many accusations circulating,
they're holding her and going up the stairs.
Does the vetting process of presidential candidates dispel rumor and consolidate fact?
Keep going forward and power through it.
Or is the American political landscape becoming ever more fertile ground for conspiracy theories? Randolph Nogle, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me here in the studio is Christina Asquith. She's a journalist and editor of the Fuller Project for International Reporting. And from Washington, D.C., we're joined by Ashe Schow, a senior political columnist for the New York Observer. Thanks, both of you, for joining us. Christina, if it wasn't for that guy, Zdenek Gazda, and his smartphone video, we might not have been having this conversation. First up, when you saw that footage, were you worried?
Of course. I mean, it looked like it could be a precarious situation. Mm-hmm. I think everybody was worried to see someone at that level stumble, but when the medical diagnosis was revealed that she was either overheating and then had pneumonia, I mean, it sounded to me like something you might expect from somebody who's been on the campaign trail for well over a year now. Can we ask legitimately, after seeing that footage and after the speculation that preceded it, with the coughing, fits and so on, can we ask legitimately, is she unwell? There's no evidence that she's unwell. There's no evidence that her health condition rises to the level of making her unfit for office. She's released more of her health records than Donald Trump has, and everything seems like it's fine. Who doesn't get sick occasionally, and I'm sure she'll get sick again if she's in office over the course of 4 years. Is she being held to a different standard? Absolutely. Donald Trump has made her gender focal point of this presidential campaign. He continually talks about her being unfit, not tough enough, not strong enough, as though those were the qualities and solely the qualities that you need for a successful president. And unfortunately for her, this fits right into that attack. So, Ashe, she's being held to a different standard, and there's no clear evidence that she's seriously ill.
Well, I'll give the no clear evidence that she's seriously unwell. I mean, this might have just been an episode. The campaign didn't handle it properly, definitely not, and that leads into issues of transparency. But on the idea that she's being held to a different standard because she's a woman, that's exactly what she wants people to think. Oh, if you criticize me, it's because you're sexist. It's kind of what Obama did. Well, not he, but his surrogates did in 2008. If you criticize me, you're racist. That's what Hillary Clinton's been playing into her entire campaign. Vote for me. I'm a woman. I'm going to be the first woman president. That's her making gender an issue. And as far as a double standard, we can go back to 2008 and look at how John McCain was treated by the media. His health was constantly questioned. People were constantly saying, oh, he's going to die in his first term in office. So no, there is no double standard. Best double standard is how Democrats are treated versus Republicans.
Okay, Christina, the John McCain comparison, isn't this the same thing? There's no, really no question in my mind that she has been treated differently because of her gender, going well beyond this incident. There's just, your guest raises a good point about her campaign not handling this well, and I think that is a story, but I think it's a story for maybe the third paragraph of a political newspaper that covers Washington, D.C. It doesn't rise to the level of several headlines in the New York Times. It certainly doesn't rise to the level of the CNN running that clip 40 times over 10 minutes as though she is about to, let's dig her grave, it's all over. There's, really, I think that if Hillary Clinton was an issue, health was an issue, she wouldn't be running this campaign. I mean, she's got 4, maybe 8 years in front of her, and, this is a bout of pneumonia, and I think we'll forget about it in about a week. Ashe, this has been highly politicized, particularly from the right. It's opened up a sort of torrent of abuse and conspiracy theories. There are those online saying, no, it was a body double when she emerged from her daughter's apartment on the 9/11 anniversary. That wasn't her. She has Alzheimer's, she has Parkinson's, and so on and so forth. That helps back up Christina's argument, right? That there's a bunch of people out there who have a vindictive approach towards Hillary Clinton and her health. Would you agree with that?
Well, there's a lot of conspiracy theorists, and I think the conspiracy theories surrounding her health are pretty ridiculous. I wouldn't say that there weren't conspiracy theories about other candidates, Republicans or Democrats, in the past. Maybe it's a little worse at this point, but I also think, I don't know, so there's a lot of emboldened people on the internet at this point. But getting back to the original point and going on beyond this is the problem with the way that Hillary's campaign handled this is that it continues to show this problem with transparency that she has. She's released more health records than Donald Trump. She hasn't released as much as Obama or Mitt Romney or John McCain. But, I mean, the campaign's strategy always seems to be lie first, and then once that lie has been proven, the video, then they come out and tell the truth. And then by that point, people aren't really sure whether they can believe them, and that opens these ideas for these conspiracy theories to come through. And then the campaign can just call everybody a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, Christina, they messed it up. They mishandled it. They said she's got allergies. Now there's a trust deficit. Trust was always an issue. I was looking at polls today. New poll, Clinton is behind Trump by 5 points in Ohio. There might be a strong correlation with the recent health episode. Are you worried about her losing the race to the White House because of this?
I don't think that this is going to be a major factor, really, in the campaign. I think most Americans have made up their mind by now. And as we go into the 3 presidential debates, I can only appeal to the journalists there to start asking some real questions. If you want to talk about women's health, let's talk about women's health. Hillary Clinton has done so much for women's health. And all of the decisions that will be in front of the commander-in-chief, from Supreme Court justice to amount of funding that goes to programming to empower women around the world, those are some real issues that we could talk about. And I hope that, you know, and I have no question in my mind that Hillary Clinton would love to talk about those. She seems like someone who's so much more comfortable talking about content and about issues than about these campaign optics. I personally don't think that there was a huge error on the behalf of her campaign. You know, nobody could predict what could have happened. I'm not sure it's anyone's business that she has a cold. Anyway.
But it's pneumonia, right? It's more than a cold.
It's pneumonia, that's right, but it's not something like that's going to, it's not a disease that's going to affect her for years and years, like Parkinson's or cancer. It's not going to become an issue going forward. So, you know, we can seize on a few incidences over the course of her 25 years and put them all together and say, now we have a trust issue. I've watched her as a journalist for 25 years, starting in 1995, and I don't see that there's a trust issue. I have never bought into that narrative, and I don't say that as an advocate. I just say that as an observer.
There isn't a trust issue, Ash?
There absolutely is, and Clinton's had 3 bad weeks of nonstop bad news, from bad polls, from the FBI investigation that made her look completely incompetent as Secretary of State when it came to mishandling classified information in her emails, in her private email server. Plus, we have the email server, we have the Clinton Foundation. There was bad news regarding that in several large newspapers. It's just been one thing after another. This health scare is just one thing in weeks of bad news for her. Meanwhile, Trump has mainly stayed out of the bad news, round. There hasn't been a lot of bad news for Trump in the past couple of weeks. It's all been on Clinton. Trump has finally kind of learned to stay out, and it kind of looks like the Clinton campaign is imploding. Now, that can definitely all change when the debates come out, if Clinton looks very presidential and Trump just looks snippy. So that remains to be seen. That might be the way that she can turn this all around, but based on the past 3 weeks, her campaign is really flailing right now.
Come in, Christina.
Sure. I think your guest, with all due respect, sitting in Washington, represents everything that's wrong with the coverage of this campaign. None of those examples that she mentioned bear fruit. There was no issue in the investigation into her email server. There was really nothing that came out on the Clinton Foundation. And you want to talk about 3 bad weeks, okay, that's fine, but we're talking about 20 years of service that she's done. Let's look at what she did over her 4 years as Secretary of State. There's so much more to talk about than just this email server. And journalists, especially like your guests who just want to talk about campaign optics all the time. I mean, I think the American public is so sick of this, and that Matt Lauer debacle tapped right into the public's frustration with the media's shallow coverage of, like, this is some sort of reality TV show, and if she stumbles once in the next 2 months, well, she can't be president.
Right.
It needs to be a deeper conversation than this.
Ash, talking about reality TV shows, Trump is gonna have his medical details or records revealed on the Dr. Oz show. He's milking this, isn't he, Ash? What do you think about that?
He absolutely is, and this whole election has been a reality TV show, but elections in America have pretty much been reality TV shows going back to the Clinton #1. The rise of 24/7 media has definitely made that worse.
So we're just going to go along with that, not challenge it?
We absolutely challenge it. I'm not challenging it. You're being quite rude, quite honestly, accusing me of doing these things. But quite honestly, I mean, this is a reality TV show. This is how the American people are kind of seeing it. Whether the media is covering that or not, we can't just say that, oh, Clinton hasn't done anything wrong. There was absolutely things found in her email scandal. We had James Comey testifying before the American people that she lied, answering questions that she lied. And yet there wasn't any indictment, but there was absolutely things found wrong. That's what people have a problem with, is that the media lies to them and is trying to say, oh, there was nothing wrong, when the people honestly see that there was something wrong.
Okay, final 20 seconds from you, Christina, please, because I got to wrap.
I mean, my issues is that I think that's a story. That's maybe 5% of the story, and yet it gets 95% of the attention. You know, I cover women's issues around the world.
That's what the people care about.
And I think that there are, for example, Clinton has promised that half her cabinet has been women. I am sitting a couple hundred miles away from a conflict that has claimed 200,000 lives, and we have two candidates. Where do they stand on these issues? What will they do in the face of a rising Russia, a rising China? You know, I think Hillary Clinton tried to answer those questions in the Matt Lauer interview. She was cut off. I'd love to hear Trump talk more seriously and be pressed on them, other than saying, I'm not going to reveal what my plan is for ISIS. You know, these are just much more important questions that we need to start asking the candidates, and not pass the buck by saying, you know, that's just a reality show and I'm just part of this machine helplessly.
Okay, unfortunately, I got to wrap. Christina and Ashe, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Coming up next on the Newsmakers, British MPs give their assessment of the country's intervention in Libya in 2011, and it's not positive. And in Picture This, the sound of success at the Paralympic Games in Rio. A British parliamentary committee has released a damning assessment of the UK's intervention in Libya in 2011. It says the government failed to develop a coherent strategy when it joined France and the US in the military campaign that helped to topple Muammar Gaddafi. Gracie Jerome takes a closer look.
We must keep on with the NATO mission until civilians are all protected and until this work is finished. We will help you to find Gaddafi and to bring him to justice.
In March 2011, the UK and France led NATO's military intervention in Libya. They were confident that overthrowing Muammar Gaddafi was key to bringing peace to the country. But they failed to plan for the aftermath, and the power vacuum that followed Gaddafi's fall left room for sectarian war and later the rise of Daesh. Now British MPs are condemning the former Prime Minister's decision to intervene.
The decision makers here were being presented with a blood-curdling assessment as to what was going to happen in Benghazi and therefore the need to act. It was in that climate that decisions were taken, not on the basis of a cool, calm analysis of exactly what the situation was and what the right response would be.
A Foreign Affairs Select Committee says there was no evidence the UK carried out a proper analysis of the nature of the rebellion in Libya, and that a lack of planning drifted a mission designed to protect civilians into a policy of regime change by military means. The panel's blaming Cameron's decision to follow France into Libya for the country's economic collapse, descent into tribal warfare, and the humanitarian crisis that's followed. They say the coalition failed to identify the extremist element of the 2011 uprising, and that the rise of Daesh shows that the coalition hasn't delivered on its promise
to take the dangerous weapons out of Libya.
US President Barack Obama first showed unity with Cameron.
We have worked closely together to help bring about freedom and peace in Libya.
But has since called the coalition's next move the biggest mistake of his presidency.
Probably failing to plan for the day after what I think was the right thing to do in intervening in Libya.
The UK Foreign Office is defending the intervention. It says it was an international decision, not just a British and French one. But 5 years after the fall of Gaddafi, Libya is still marred in political chaos, with many groups fighting for control. Gracie Jerome, The Newsmakers.
Joining me now from Cambridge in the UK is Rhiannon Smith, who's Managing Director of Libya Analysis, a website and consultancy. Thanks so much for joining us, Rhiannon. This was sort of a Chilcot report for Libya. Any surprises for you in that report?
I don't think it was particularly surprising, particularly given, this report has come out after Cameron is no longer Prime Minister. I think Theresa May is trying to kind of wipe the slate clean, and she can, blame what happened in Libya on Cameron rather than her own sort of administration. But I think, all the things that are in this report, these are things that we've known for a long time. This report has come out 5 years after the initial intervention, so a lot of the things that are in this report are nothing new.
You seem to be suggesting that they might be somewhat unfairly pinning the blame solely on David Cameron.
Yeah, I think, when the UK intervened in Libya, as was mentioned in your report there, I think there wasn't necessarily enough evidence. There were, quite a few assumptions that were incorrect. But at the same time, you had this spectre of full-scale massacre in Benghazi, and I think there wasn't really time to consider, the ins and outs, and I think they really acted to try and protect the civilians of Benghazi. Yes, we followed France into that, but I think it's very easy in hindsight to say, well, what were the other options?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, they speak about missed opportunities, the fact that Tony Blair perhaps knew Muammar Gaddafi or had some sort of line of communication. The LSE ties with Saif al-Gaddafi. The report doesn't specifically mention this, but the Gaddafi family even directly funded LSE. But you would expect them, during that context, at that time, to want to distance themselves from Gaddafi at a time when he's massacring civilians, right, in Benghazi. Is the report being a little bit, overtly hopeful that they could have found these direct lines of communication back then?
I think so, yes. We have to remember at the time when the no-fly zone was initiated, there was a call for this from the Arab League. It was quite different to the way, the NATO intervention in Iraq or Afghanistan. There was a direct call for this, which the UN followed up with the resolution 1973. And yeah, so I think it is quite different in that respect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the African Union as well was sort of sidelined. I remember former South African President Thabo Mbeki trying to mediate, and they told him, no, stay home. At the crux of all of this, what's the message to the British people? That going into Libya was a mistake and it was wrong, or the message of the report is we should have gone in, but we messed it up thereafter, and we didn't stay to clean up the mess, or we didn't stay to rebuild the country? Which one is it?
I would say it's more so the latter of those. Mm-hmm. I think one of the big messages of the report, which I think is accurate, is that, Libya is an incredibly complex place. You only have to look at what is going on now. You have parallel governments, parallel institutions, parallel oil institutions, parallel banks. You have a whole plethora of different militias aligned to different political parties. And I think what this report, one strong message in it, which is the case, is that we didn't really understand what we were getting into in Libya. We went in saying, OK, we're going to try and protect the civilians, and then obviously it spiraled and it did change. One thing I would say, though, I think one of the messages in the report is that, we didn't do enough afterwards to support the state building. And while that is true to a degree, you have to remember that at the time, on the ground in Libya, in the early days of the revolution, 2011, 2012, the message from the Libyan people was very much, actually, we don't want outside support. We want to do this by ourselves. We want it to be a Libyan solution. So as much as, yes, we should be able to understand the situation better and make efforts to understand it better and build our support and political consensus based on that, I think at the time, there was definitely a reluctance to get involved in the kind of nation building which took place in Iraq, which obviously was quite disastrous. And there was this message from the Libyan people. So I think it's quite important to remember that as well.
Okay, Rhiannon Smith, thank you very much. Good to talk to you. In today's Picture This, there's a distinctive pattern emerging in the images of athletes on the podium at the Rio Paralympics. Many of them have been photographed holding their medals up to their ear. Let's take a look why. Our newsmaker today was Hillary Clinton, as we asked how her campaign for the White House has been affected by her diagnosis of pneumonia. One of our guests was Clinton supporter Christina Asquith from the Fuller Project for International Reporting. She said that as a woman, Clinton is held to different standards from male candidates and is expected to do more to prove her strength and capability. But political columnist Ashe Schow told us this has nothing to do with double standards and everything to do with a lack of transparency by Clinton and her campaign, which she believes has had a particularly bad couple of weeks. You've been watching this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garta. Thank you for watching. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.